Welcome to Badger Talks Quick Picks, which brings exciting happenings, resources, and talent from your UW flagship campus to the people of Wisconsin and beyond, demonstrating the power of the Wisconsin idea, one connection at a time.
Hi, welcome to today's Badger Talk. My name is Lu Han. I'm a professor of real estate and urban land economics at the Wisconsin School of Business. Before I start, I would like to have you imagine yourself walk through those two neighborhoods in Seattle on a hot day like today. The neighborhood on the left is leafy, is cool, and is shaded, and the one on the right has very few trees. If I ask you to choose, I guess you would choose the greener one. But really, what do those trees mean for our cities and for our neighborhoods? What differences do they make? And can we quantify the value of trees in dollar amount? So this is exactly what we are aiming to address in this new research, Cool Cities, the Value of Trees, joined with my colleague Chris Timmins and our co-authors, Stefan Hiblick and Janos Zilberberg. Now, we know trees are valuable. They're making our cities not only more beautiful, but also more livable and sustainable. In particular, trees helps reduce noise, improve air quality, lower stress, and improve mental health, and also promote those physical outdoor activities. And very importantly, trees help cooling down the cities. And those cooling benefits are particularly essential in light of the so-called urban heat island effects, which basically refers to the temperature difference between the central cities and the surrounding rural areas. Cities, as you can see, are where the structure, hard surface, and buildings are highly concentrated, and greenery is very limited. As a result, in the summer, those cities become islands of a high temperature relative to surrounding rural areas. And today in the US, over 50% of the population, over 80% of the population in the US and over 50% of the population around the world, we live in the cities. As the cities grow larger and denser in population, what we have also seen is the cities have increasing share of those impervious hard surface and also declining share of the green space. And together they make the urban temperature higher and higher in the summer. And this trend is expected to continue because the urban population will more than double by 2050, and the cities, as a result, are going to be increasingly exposed to extreme heat resulting from both climate change and urban heat island effects, which is going to damage human health and economic development. But the good news is that in cities, between people and buildings, there are also urban trees, and the trees turn out to be a great mitigator of the urban heat island effects. And to show this, we're going to focus on Toronto, which is one of the greenest cities in North America. Now, to start, I want to show you how representative Toronto is. So we collected 120 largest North American cities from 1985 onward. On the vertical axis here is a temperature difference between 1985 and 2020, and on the horizontal axis is the tree cover differences during the same period. As you can see, climate change has caused an average North American city being 3 Celsius degrees warmer in the summer of 2020 relative to 1985. However, the cities that have become greener during this period are also warmer at a much slower pace. And as you can see, Toronto, marked by the square, is right along the trend line, which means that Toronto is not an outlier. Now, zooming into Toronto, what we see is between 1980 and 2010, the city has become greener and greener as indicated by the green line there. And as a result, summer temperature becomes cooler and cooler as indicated by the purple line here. However, after 2010, those trends have completely reversed. Has Toronto followed its pre-2010 trends, today Toronto would have been 4 percentage points greener and 3.4 Celsius degree cooler. So what caused the turning point? It turns out around 2010 and 2009, the so-called emerald ash borer infestation wiped out 8% of Toronto's tree canopy in the subsequent years. The shaded areas here shows you how many trees Toronto has lost every year since then. Now, a simple regression analysis shows you because of this emerald ash borer infestation, Toronto has lost 2 percentage points in the summer forest, and correspondingly, summer temperature also increased by 0.8 Celsius degree. So what we have learned here is trees are really valuable, and particularly they help cool down the cities. But the question is, can we quantify those benefits in dollar amounts? And to do so, we're going to estimate how much home buyers will be willing to pay for having an additional tree on their streets. We're also going to estimate the amenity values of urban trees, such as temperature moderation, energy consumption saving, and air pollution reduction. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip the literature discussion. So to do this analysis, we combine those high-resolution satellite image on land classification, particularly on tree canopies, with Toronto's entire residential transactions between 2004 and 2020. Using this data, we first plot the relationship between each property's price and also its tree share in the neighborhood where the property sits. As you can see, in the leafy streets, there are often more expensive homes. However, studying the value or the tree effects on the house price can be very tricky because on the one hand, you can say leafy streets, they tend to be more established neighborhoods. And as a result, they may have better school districts, and they may have better and larger homes. They may also have richer households. All of this is likely to cause an upward bias in the relationship between the tree and house price. On the other hand, we know that in those expensive neighborhoods, land cost is also very high, making opportunity cost of maintaining urban forestry very high. And that's going to cause a downward bias in this relationship of interest. So what is our solution? Well, here is how the nature could help us. On this slide, what you see is this green beetle, which is called emerald ash borer. Emerald ash borer was first detected in North America in 2002, and since then, it has killed tens of millions of ash trees in North America, including 860,000 ash trees in Toronto and 10,000 ash trees in Madison. So here is a picture of the ash trees. Ash trees, they're considered as the second best urban trees for the North American environment. The first best is elm trees. But elm trees were pretty much all wiped out during the previous infestation of a similar scale, which is called Dutch elm disease, that has spread across North America between 1940 and 1970. As a result of Dutch elm disease, many cities decided to replace elm trees with ash trees. So today, the spatial allocation of ash trees in Toronto pretty much mirrors the initial allocation of elm trees, which was determined in 1930s. And for that reason, we think initial allocation of the ash tree would serve as a great instrument to help us isolate exogenous variations in the tree canopy changes, but not so much correlated with house price dynamics. And to show this, we first regress the tree canopy change between 2007 and 2018 on the initial ash tree density in 2010. And what you see here is a precisely estimated strong negative relationship, which means loss of ash trees substantially reduces tree covers between 2007 and 2018 in Toronto, giving you very strong first stage power. In addition, we also did this balance test, which shows that other than reducing the tree covers by 4%, the initial allocation of ash trees has no correlation with those typical neighborhood characteristics or house characteristics that we would think to influence house price dynamics. And together, this really provides reassuring evidence for how powerful and how convenient this instrument could be. So now, coming to our main estimation, we regress the house price on the neighborhood's tree cover, controlling for the detailed neighborhood and house characteristics using this initial ash tree density as the instrument. And what we find here is each additional tree increases property value by 0.45%, which means for $1 million home buyers would be willing to pay $4,500 more just for having one additional tree on that street. And in Toronto, those most heavily affected neighborhoods by this emerald ash borer infestation has lost 7% of tree covers. As a result, their property values decline by 7%. So now you see there is a substantial premium people are willing to pay for the tree, but what explains that premium? Well, we know one benefit that we enjoy from having trees is those cooling effects. So what you see here is the 2018 heat wave map in the city of Toronto in the summer. And here, we're zooming into the South Parkdale areas. And there are two adjacent neighborhoods here divided by this vertical street called Dufferin. And to the west of Dufferin, there are a lot more green trees than to the east of Dufferin. And as a result, you see in the summer of 2018, the temperature is also much cooler to the west of Dufferin. And now, to quantify this cooling effect, we're going to use the same regression framework and the same instrument. And what we find is that 1 percentage point in tree cover within the postal code would reduce the temperature by 0.05 Celsius degree. Now, those most affected neighborhoods has lost 7% of their tree covers. As a result, today their summer temperature is about 0.35 Celsius degree higher. Now, as summer gets hotter, households are going to increasingly rely on air conditioners, which is going to increase their energy consumption. Using the same framework, what we find is 1 additional percentage point in tree cover within a postal code also reduces the average consumption on energy during the summer months by about 2.5%. Now, let me remind you, those residential cooling and heating expenses accounts for 11% of the total U.S. energy use. So here we show that those urban trees could potentially offer significant savings here. Finally, I also want to point out trees have increasingly become an equity asset. So here, what we plot is a relationship between the fraction of tree covers at the neighborhood level and also the share of low-income households. As you can see, areas with sparse greenery, they're often economically disadvantaged. And we found similar evidence in other locations, for example, Los Angeles. So here you see that urban trees are highly unevenly distributed across different neighborhoods in LA. So is urban heat, so is income. So in a summer like this, if you walk in the wealthy neighborhoods, you will find yourself often enjoy those comfortable, cool shades, versus if you walk in a relatively lower income neighborhoods, you are going to be exposed to blazing suns. Now, what this means is that rich are going to become richer, not only in terms of their personal wealth, but also in terms of their access to public assets. And in this case, it's urban trees. And in the same time, those lower income residents, they may not have much experience with all these nice benefits the urban trees could provide, such as improve the air quality and also reduce the noise and reduce the temperature and beautiful neighborhoods. So finally, if we come back to these two neighborhoods that we saw earlier, you might have guessed the greener neighborhood is a wealthy neighborhood, and the other one is not so wealthy. So many urban trees, they're actually public assets. Therefore, it is a responsibility of the cities to determine not only how many to plant them to promote sustainability, but also where to plant them to ensure equity. By quantifying the value of the urban trees in terms of people's willingness to pay, energy consumption savings, the temperature moderations, and improve the air quality, which I didn't have time to show, we are hoping that our estimates can provide useful guidance for the relevant policies, making our cities greener, more sustainable, more equitable, and ultimately stronger. This research is forthcoming in American Economic Review Insights. Thank you for your listening.